So our first foray into the user interface here, when I booted it up, I did not select either large objects, feet, or small objects, inches, or anything like that. So it set me to the default scale, which I think sets you to small objects, inches. I'm not sure exactly. But in order to, well, that doesn't look right. In order to figure out what units we're working in, you have a visual cue at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to talk a lot today about the information that you see at the bottom of the screen. First and foremost is this one right here. So for if you're all the way in the back, it's right down there. So that says millimeters. That is your unit type. So if you type in a unit of 1 for a length of a line, it will be drawn 1 millimeter long. We want to work probably in feet and inches, and I don't necessarily care about whether or not you prefer to work in inches or feet. Just know that we are going to be working in imperial units. So we have to change the units. So when you type in units, and again, this is the same as AutoCAD, it brings you to document properties. Okay, so be aware that document properties is a larger menu for many different types of settings. The command units brought us to the units subsetting category. Okay, so that's what you're seeing here, and that's why there are so many of these other options on the left-hand side. And we will introduce those in time as they become necessary. I don't want to overload you with everything yet. Okay, so first thing you do with a brand new file is you always set your units. And even if you picked one of those selections, I oftentimes will just be in the habit of popping it open to double check that I clicked the right one. So because our PDF file is drawn in feet, I'm going to be working in feet primarily. So you might want to follow suit with that. Absolute tolerance is the information that you're going to get back when you measure something. So if you measure something that you've drawn at 24 feet, it'll say 24 feet in imperial units. But if you ask it for the exact decimal count, if you switched it to decimals, then you would get 3 decimal places, and that's what that tolerance would read. So relative tolerance and angle tolerance, I wouldn't worry so much about those. It's really just trying to simplify the exactness of the geometry as you're building things in digital space. So for us, we have a distance display, which will change the reading of the information that you get back. So if you're working in feet and you type in something as 24 feet 0 inches, when you measure it, it'll come back as 24.000. When the display precision is set to 3 decimal places. So you can switch it to feet and inches. I will, but you don't have to. So some of you might have these extra toolbars that started floating in space when you open the program. Yes?
So if you switch it from feet and inches from decimal, does that affect the absolute tolerance? Like in terms of, because you said absolute tolerance is how many decimals it will show? So
Think of it like the internal snap of the software. It won't actually calculate anything farther than right now 1/1000th of your unit. So 1/1000th of a foot. So if you place something in space and you try to measure its location, call it in 2 dimensions, your x value and your y value will be no more accurate than 1/1000th of a place.
okay, so that doesn't affect whether or not the distance displays decimal.
No, it won't. It won't affect the display. This just says even if something. We should talk about that actually. Thank you. Display precision will present the information only to a certain measurement, and it will round up and down. So if you were to say 1 foot, even though I've drawn something 1 foot 9 inches, the information, if I measure it, that I get back is going to say 2 feet, because it's going to round it up. If I go to 1 1/4, right, so this is 1/4 inch precision. So if I measure something that was drawn at 1 foot 1 and 3/16 of an inch, it'll give me 1 foot 1 and a quarter. Okay, so let me just gauge your knowledge of measurement systems real quick before we move forward. Do we all fully understand, fractional values and what their numerical counterparts are approximately? You don't have to be an expert and say, I don't expect you to know that 3/8 of an inch is 0.375 necessarily, but you get it, right, when I say either or? Okay. So I tend to work at 1/8 inch precision, but you don't really have to. I might at some point ask us to switch back and do some double checking to make sure that we're exact in our sizes, but you'll see how that plays a role a little bit later on. So these extra menus, they're actually for plugins, I believe. So T-splines is a plugin. So sometimes when you have a plugin, you might have the windows and either not visible, or they might float in space until you dock them somewhere, or they might actually load pretty cleverly just right up to the top somewhere. But for us, we don't really need to worry about these extra plugins. They're more advanced features than we're going to get to, especially in the first part of the class here. So you can close those out just by clicking on the little red X. And then we've got a clean workspace. Did I close it? No, I didn't. Okay. So my suggestion to some of you is to possibly, if you're used to docking anything on the right-hand side of the screen, you can. This is just an option of a workflow where you might be able to pull the information off to the side like this a little bit. Or you can flip back and forth. If you're not super privy to the hotkeys in Windows, if you do want to switch back and forth, Alt-Tab will bring up a selection of whatever windows you have open currently. So if you Alt-Tab and then click on the PDF, it'll bring it to the forefront. So I will probably, for your sake, since I'm going to be presenting up here, be Alt-Tabbing. But feel free to dock it on the sides if you want. But know that when you dock it on the sides, sometimes some of your toolbars might get affected. Speaking of which, I don't seem to have my Properties toolbar on the right, so I'm going to type in Properties. There we go. Yes?
I don't have that tool.
You don't have these up here? Okay, good. So thank you for the reminder. Again, if you guys boot this up in this classroom, well, any of the classrooms here, sometimes it might not initialize all the toolbars. So if you don't have any toolbars, just close the software and reopen it. Okay. So again, properties, right? Properties is incredibly important because properties is where you're going to be able to view and modify all the characteristics of the geometry that you're making. You'll see here that right now I have nothing selected, except we know that the perspective view currently, for me at least, is active because it's blue, not gray like top, front, and right. So what you're seeing here is the property is the only selected object, which is the viewport, is giving me the title of the viewport, the width and height in pixels, what projection it's in. So right now it's in perspective projection, which means you can kind of see it pictorially falling away to the horizon behind. And then the other stuff we'll talk about a little bit more when it comes into play. But for me, and the way that I prefer to use this software in terms of setting it up, is I like to dock it on the right-hand side. So it doesn't seem to want to let me do that right now. Why won't you let me dock? There we go. Okay. So I double-clicked it and it let me dock. That was odd. But you can actually pull any of these menus off and put them back on the side of the screen in order to dock it in the program. You can also pull them off and hit X if you want to close it, but I don't think this is one that you pretty much ever want to close. Okay, so that was sort of just user interface introduction. I've got to get into some real modeling elements here, but I try not to let my videos go beyond 10 minutes. If those of you who are very, very observant and can see down there, if I'm going far, far beyond 10 minutes, raise your hand, let me know, because I'm trying to keep these videos small enough that you can take them with you and watch them in little bits and pieces as you go along if you want to practice more. So I'll stop here and then we'll continue on.